They thought she was invisible, a black janitor working late nights in a corporate office filled with white executives who barely noticed her presence. They laughed, shared stories, and carried on, dismissing her as just another face in the background. But little did they know, this janitor was far more than she appeared. She had been quietly observing, learning, and uncovering the truths hidden in plain sight. When the company faced its darkest hour, it wasn't the board or the high-paid consultants who had the answers. It was her. And when she made her move, firing the CEO, it sent shockwaves through the entire corporation. What led her to take such a bold step? And how did the power dynamics flip so dramatically? This is the jaw-dropping story of resilience, intelligence, and the ultimate redemption that no one saw coming. Stay tuned because what happens next will leave you speechless. She wasn't always a janitor. In fact, she once dreamed of a seat in a corner office, climbing the corporate ladder like anyone else. But dreams don't always pan out, especially when you don't fit the mold. Overlooked, underestimated, and pushed aside, she took the only job she could find, to clean the offices she once hoped to lead. For years, she worked in silence, watching executives walk past without so much as a nod. But what they didn't know was that she listened. As she emptied trash bins and wiped desks, she absorbed everything: the conversations, the decisions, and most importantly, the mistakes. Behind closed doors, the company was crumbling. The CEO, charismatic on the outside, was making choices that put profits over people, leaving employees frustrated and investors nervous. But no one dared to question him, except her. Quietly, she began piecing together the cracks in their empire. What would she do next? One late night, as she emptied the CEO's trash, a crumpled document caught her eye. It wasn't just any paper. It outlined decisions that would lead to massive layoffs, cutting hundreds of jobs to cover up financial mismanagement. Her heart sank. These weren't just numbers on a page. These were people's lives. The janitor, who everyone dismissed as invisible, suddenly found herself holding a secret that could change everything. But what could she do? Who would listen to her? Word spread among employees about potential cuts, and the air grew tense. People whispered in break rooms, trying to piece together what was happening. Meanwhile, she quietly built her own case. She remembered names, faces, and conversations. Details most would ignore, but could prove the truth. The executives, still unaware, continued their meetings and laughter, confident their power was untouchable. Little did they know, someone they had overlooked was about to shake the very foundation of their world. The tension in the office was unbearable. Employees were on edge, unsure if they'd still have jobs by the end of the month. Meanwhile, she worked quietly in the background, gathering every piece of evidence she could. Meeting schedules left behind, emails printed out carelessly, and whispered conversations in hallways. Everything painted a picture of corruption and greed at the highest levels. One night, while cleaning the conference room after hours, she stumbled upon a flash drive left behind by a senior executive. Curiosity mixed with hesitation, but something told her this was the key. Back home, she plugged it in and found what she feared: proof of shady deals and misuse of funds, all orchestrated by the CEO himself. Now she had the truth in her hands, but exposing it wasn't going to be easy. If she failed, the company would crumble, and she'd lose everything. But if she succeeded, the power dynamics would never be the same again. Just as she was preparing to figure out her next move, a second discovery left her stunned. Buried within the files on the flash drive was evidence tying the CEO to a scheme that went far beyond bad management. It involved funneling money into personal accounts under the guise of company expenses. It wasn't just incompetence, it was outright fraud. And worse, some of the executives who had been laughing at her all those years were complicit. The scale of the corruption was staggering. But before she could act, she noticed something odd. The next morning, the CEO's behavior changed. He appeared more paranoid, glancing over his shoulder and making sudden changes to meeting schedules. She realized with a sinking feeling that someone had tipped him off about missing files. The walls were closing in, and now she wasn't just fighting to save the company, she was in danger of being discovered. Time was running out. With the clock ticking, she knew she had to act fast. Quietly, she reached out to a trusted contact, a former employee who had left the company after raising concerns about the CEO's practices, only to be silenced. Together, they compiled the evidence, creating an airtight case that would expose everything. But as the CEO's paranoia grew, he started making sudden changes, including canceling key meetings and rearranging departments, trying to cover his tracks. The day came when she walked into a high-stakes board meeting, files in hand. She wasn't supposed to be there. Security even tried to stop her. But the board members were curious when she demanded to speak. She revealed everything: the fraud, the mismanagement, and the human cost of the CEO's actions. Gasps filled the room as the flash drive's contents were projected on the screen. But the twist? It wasn't just the CEO who faced consequences. Several executives who had belittled her were also implicated. The CEO was fired on the spot, and the board offered her a leadership role to help rebuild the company's reputation. But she declined, leaving a room with her head held high. The lesson she left behind: never underestimate someone you think is invisible, because they just might hold the power to change everything. After walking out of that boardroom, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It wasn't about revenge or recognition. It was about standing up for what was right. The company, once teetering on the edge of collapse, began the long process of rebuilding with new leadership and a commitment to transparency. Employees who had feared for their jobs now had a glimmer of hope. As for her, she returned to the life she had quietly built, finding peace in knowing she had made a difference. The story of the janitor who exposed the CEO became a legend within the company, a reminder that true leadership isn't about titles or appearances, it's about integrity and courage. Her story left an undeniable message. No matter how small or overlooked you may feel, you have the power to create change. Sometimes, the people in the shadows are the ones who shine the brightest when it matters most.